in our first session, we shifted and widened our conception of the Divine and the Divine Mother, and thereby our relationship with the Divine and the Divine Mother. When we conceive of the Divine in a very narrow form, in a limited aspect, necessarily our relationship reduces to that aspect only. This is the reason why the various religions across the world and across history have been in conflict with each other. One will view the Divine in its aspect of love, another in aspect of power, another in aspect of perhaps knowledge, or other. And so the God of love and the God of power are very different in terms of experience, and therefore in terms of relationship, and therefore in the whole formulation of what follows in the religious tradition. Even when you reduce the Divine to a form or an aspect in form, you have my God is a jealous God who is against other gods, your God is superior or inferior. It does not make sense. If we look at the nature of the Divine in its true sense, the whole perspective changes. And this is one of the special features of the Indian civilization. Shri Aurobindo describes it thus: three great realizations of the Indian civilization. First, that there is only one Divine, one origin, one source, which therefore is also one goal, one culmination. There are no two to begin with. You may know it by various names or various forms or various aspects. The example given is of the wise men touching the elephant. One touches the trunk, one touches the ears. They describe differently because their perception is limited, because they are blind. But when you enter into the fullness of the experience in its luminosity, in a revealed experience, it is always the same one, in innumerable aspects and facets. But it is one. The second great realization of the civilization, although that is one, and we are of course many, that one can express itself innumerably in every aspect, in every form, in every way possible. Anything you can conceive can be one of its aspects and powers or forms. The one is not bound to its oneness. It is infinitely multiple in identity always. Each is the same in identity, but numerically innumerable, infinite even. But the third great realization is, since each one of us is also therefore a special aspect of that, each has his unique way of relating to that one and finding his relation and oneness with that. Now this is critical. Although the source is one, each one of us, uniquely expressive of that, also has a unique relationship with that. And from this comes this extraordinary idea of the Sraddhalu. Your innate truth is unique to you. My innate truth is unique to me. And therefore I can say with great joy, please find your way to God as I find my way to God. And I do not need to force you to follow my way, nor force myself to follow your way. It would be a mistake. And this is the great difference between religions and the tradition of Dharma. Religion, by definition, is groupthink. Everybody has to think the same, follow the same, sometimes wear the same dress, believe the same thing. And if you deviate, you are punished for it. Or if enough people deviate, which has to happen because Divine is infinite facets, so the religion splits into two and they keep warring. But on a fine distinction, which eventually becomes a big difference. inevitably any groupthink will tend to split, because there is always a lack in any limited groupthink, which the human soul aspires for that which is missing, and it will split. You see the rationale behind this. Now here comes a very fascinating idea. Swami Vivekananda puts it thus: if every religion continues to split and divide, until you are left with one religion for each person, that is spirituality. That is the approach of the Dharma. And the Indian civilization is based on this, rooted in Dharma. And while there is the Dharma of the one in its unfolding, which is universal, infinite, and yet free, so too there is an individual Dharma specific to each one of us, in relation to that which is unique. And therefore, when I follow my Dharma and you follow your Dharma, we never collide. The image one can have is, if you take the sun and the rays, between any two rays you can find an infinite variations of rays. Isn't it? But no two rays will ever cross each other. They all align straight to the same one, and they are all complementing each other. And therefore, when you follow Dharma, you never collide with somebody else's Dharma, although each follows uniquely and freely their Dharma. Isn't that so wonderful? And on this realization is the whole civilization rooted. The problem comes when from other sources, particularly the Abrahamic traditions, you have traditions which say, my truth alone is right, everyone else is wrong, you will go to hell for being wrong, and each blames the other, you will go to hell and you will go to hell. If everyone is right, then they will all go to hell. But even worse, they will say that if you do not follow my group think, then you will be punished or even killed. This idea is alien to the Indian civilization, which is the reason why the Indian civilization could absorb and embrace all and welcome them. The British use this term, Indian culture or Indian tradition is tolerant. That is a wrong idea. Tolerance is a concept again belonging to those religions. In Europe, for example, historically, when there was this conflict between the Protestants and the Catholics, and depending on which side the king was aligned to, they would kill the others for daring to believe something different from the official religion. It was normal. They would go out and just massacre anybody who believed the other system. And then came the idea of tolerance. A king said, I am tolerant, I will not kill you, but you still have to suffer the consequences of not following the official religion. But I am tolerant, meaning I will not kill you. This is the idea. And this concept is so shocking, so disturbing, that it's difficult to believe that for centuries this could have been the nature of religion across an entire domain of Europe, for example. So when the concept of religion enters India, we don't have a word for it. We don't have a word for groupthink. We have lineages, we can say pantha. But religion, which is a groupthink, does not have a concept. So what happens? They use an existing word, they call it dharma. So your dharma, my dharma, but it's not correct. Religion is not dharma. So today when you hear the conversations taking place in Hindi or even in the vernacular, they will say, their dharma is this. No, it is not. That is religion. It is not dharma. But this creates a huge confusion among those rooted in the civilizational values, because now you're putting those on equal terms. No, they are not. They're fundamentally different. They do not have equivalence. Now, once you've made that distortion, there's a consequence of another distortion. Because the word secularism, again rooted in European history, where the church had begun to dominate and become more powerful than the king, eventually the king had to separate. So secularism was separation of church from state. The church shall not interfere in political affairs. That concept now transplanted into India has no relevance again, conceptually. So how do you translate the word secular? You translate it as dharma nirapekshata, meaning not taking sides with dharma, because you call dharma as religion. Not taking sides with dharma, meaning not taking sides with the truth. It's a fundamentally flawed idea again. You see, you make one distortion and a chain of distortions follow, which leads to a complete confusion in what you should do or not do. And this needs to be stated, this needs to be clarified, this difference needs to be emphasized. So they said India is tolerant. No, it is not tolerance, it is embracement. Tolerance is I put up with you though I don't like you. Embracement is, oh wonderful, please, I'm happy that you follow your path as I follow my path. And so it's the only civilization where every tradition, every religion could not only come in, but within the civilization so many religions developed. For example, Buddhism or Jainism or various other traditions, sometimes multiple variations splitting naturally. But all of them held, when they were rooted from the Indian civilization, held this common idea that each has his own truth. They built around that because they were emerged from the same roots, as distinct from the Abrahamic traditions, where the groupthink dominates. Now, I'm placing all this before you because when we come to our discussion of the last 2 sessions, we are not talking of religions. We are talking of an underlying universal truth of experience. And from that experience, the building of a science and a technology which we will broadly call yoga. And like modern physical sciences, which are obsessed only with the material world, these are verifiable also, testable. They can be validated and experimented upon to validate, and are built on the validation by experiment and independent verification. But unlike the science, which is rooted only in matter, this domain of yoga science spans all the gradations of consciousness. It is, in a sense, the future of science. It includes material processes, as you see in the knowledge of the Hatha Yoga, biological, as well as subtle physical, occult energies, which current physical science does not even recognize, on which the biology works, prana and its movements. And it is by mastering of prana that the Hatha Yogi is able to do quite extraordinary things. There's the example of Swami Rama. He was being tested in the laboratory for his control of breath, heartbeat, and other functions, which is impressive in itself. And then he demonstrated how he could increase the temperature of any part of his body, which was even more impressive. And then suddenly, as he was doing this experiment, he could feel in his own body, okay, I've got a grip here. He said, right now, wire 2 parts of my hand. One part I'll make hot, the other part I'll make cool. And just by willing it, he could do it by redirecting the prana. Just like that. Or many other variations. You've heard of these things, I don't have to elaborate. Current science cannot explain because it is bound to matter only. Yoga science includes prana, but goes further into mana, mind processes and mind which directs prana, and goes further and further into all the way through the spiritual to the highest oneness from which all this originates. And it is not only a science, it has an application which we will call then a technology, by which you can accelerate the evolutionary process, by which you can master yourself as well as your action in the world. So yoga, and especially when we put it in the large context that we developed of the various systems of yoga and their unification in a larger perspective, is a body of knowledge which has been developed and perfected across millennia by direct experience and validated and transmitted, developed as a science and a technology. And this, Shri Aurobindo points out, is one of the great gifts that India has to make for the world, based on which the world itself can be freed from its current chaos and confusion and imprisonment in ignorance and suffering. But for India to be able to gift that, India must herself find it. So when you look back at Shri Aurobindo and his career that he began initially with fighting for India's freedom, he set in motion what was then considered radical demand for full Purna Swaraj, full freedom. People said it's impossible, you are a radical. Even today, there are Westerners who are hostile to India who will say he was a terrorist, the first terrorist. Why? Because he threatened the British Empire and said, we will not accept this. But this is the way, unfortunately, people misuse these terms. But what he fought for, he said, it is not because we hate the British. It is not because they're good or bad rulers. All that is irrelevant. He said, because India has a destiny to fulfill in the world, without which the world's future itself is in danger. And for India to give that gift which will save the world from its self-destruction, India must first find her soul, because what is to be gifted is a spiritual gift. For India to find her soul, she must become free. Therefore, we are fighting for India's freedom. You see, the perspective is so large, looking at perhaps a century or two ahead at least, isn't it? But he's seeing the larger work. India has become, let's say, politically free, not yet intellectually free, not yet culturally free, not yet economically free, and certainly spiritual freedom is a way. But at least we have a chance now to do all that even. Only now we can say barely the civilization is beginning to introspect at its own deeper roots and question its forms of organization. When India became free, we transplanted the British administrative system and continued it with the same mentality. Nothing changed. The most powerful operative of the government on the grassroots is the collector. It was under British system, and he was called collector. Why? Because his job was to collect taxes. The system was designed for exploitation and not for governance, not for service. And therefore, you see, historically in India, people fear the government. And the government demands, dominates, subjugates, oppresses. That was the British colonial rule. It continued the same culture. At what point did we stop to reverse it? We did not even make the effort. The mentality of those who took over after the British left was still the same British mentality of colonization. Jawaharlal Nehru spoke this to Kenneth Galbraith, American ambassador, who records it. He says to Kenneth Galbraith, you know, I am the last Englishman to rule India. He considers himself an Englishman. It is said he would send his clothes to dry clean in Paris. I don't know if that's true, but he sees his role as ruling India, not serving India. You see, for the first time 10 years ago, the Prime Minister of India actually said publicly, I am first prime servant. This has never happened before. All of them, all the politicians, look at their culture, dominating, imposing. When they travel in a car, you have all this security system to push you away, shoo you aside, like your cockroaches, so that their car can go straight through. You go to the airport, again security pushes you aside, they walk straight through. Why can't they suffer what you suffer at the airport and sit in the queue and realize what the common man goes through? They don't care. They are still the oppressors, they are still the rulers. The culture of colonization continues. We never stopped to question it or change it. Will we even do that? How much more will you suffer before you wake up and say, hey, we have to change something? Our minds are still colonized. The mother made this observation, the British overstayed. And it led to inertia in the mind of the Indian people. That inertia is barely now beginning to stir and wake up. And for the first time, we're questioning things. And you see the panic in public discourse when somebody questions, hey, what about this system? Should we not change it? And all those who are bound to that system for the privileges it gives them, they go into a panic. You see what's happening even in Parliament today. Will that change? When we wake up. How will you wake up? The institutions are designed to keep you asleep. When the British designed our educational system, it was designed for uprooting you, cutting you off from your roots, so that you may not know your vernacular, you may not know your Sanskrit, so that the entire body of knowledge, which is your civilizational peak, is cut off from you. And you are made, and they use this term coconut, brown skin, white inside. Thinking is British, skin is brown. And they wanted the coconut as the interface. People who thought themselves British were trying to be more British than the British. You have Nehru's example. But the same mentality continues. There is an elitism as a result of this, the colonized mindset. Is that the future of India? Is that the gift India has to give to the world? A replica of the European mindset? It will only crush and destroy what India has to give. So there is a struggle taking place currently of values, civilizational values, and the roots of the Indian civilization, and forces which want as if to crush that. But on the other side, the stirring and the awakening is also taking place, and the collision between the two is what we are experiencing today in what you see as confusion everywhere. Will this succeed? Will this awaken? That is to be seen, and it depends on us. That's what I'm pointing to. It's not going to happen automatically. If you sit back and wait and say, yes, maybe we wait 200 years and it'll happen. No, it will not. Because you gave away wealth, you gave away power to the Asura who seized it. Remember we did that when we have turned to the ascetic path? Well, the same game is happening today, far more powerfully. What the British could not do, what 1,000 years of attempt to enslave India could not achieve, can today be achieved simply through social media. You know, there is this, I don't know if you have heard, there is always this story, conspiracy going on saying there is the one world government which wants to put a chip into your body. Okay, so that you will be tagged permanently. And people tell me, you know, they have a plan to chip you. And I tell them back, no, they have already chipped you. Do you know where? You have your phone? They programmed you to cling to your chip, which is spying on you all the time. It's listening to every speech, every word you speak. And it's connected to servers across the world. It's feeding you data based on what it has already mapped your thought processes to be. The World Economic Forum's philosopher, let's say, their official philosopher who was visiting India recently, forget his name. But the man who... Yes, but the man who was here, Harari. Huh? Yuval Noah Harari, actually says this. We do not need God or soul, because the human being is a hackable creature. And we have hacked the human being now. Human mind is hacked. Why do you need soul? Why do you need God? Through this hacking, we can ensure world peace, because you will become zombies under control of AI. During the elections, depending on what was your overall alignment, and I know many people, and I've received this feedback from many, if you were using any kind of social media or news, which are all controlled by Google or Facebook or one of these US-centric, US military-controlled institutions, okay? All your news was slanted to shift your thinking. And just the 3 days before elections, you would be hammered with certain kind of messaging which would cloud you, confuse you, or make you tilt in your decision. That's how they hack an election. They hack your mind. What the British could not do, what 1,000 years of invasions or dominations could not achieve, is today done by you clinging to your chip, which is controlling you through AI. And it is a very dangerous point of transition. I'm highlighting this for a reason. It is not only a dangerous point of transition for us, most people here are quite aged, it's far more dangerous for your children and your grandchildren. Because they've grown up with social media, they have no idea what it's like to be free of social media, to think for themselves, to have time to sit alone and daydream. The moment you are alone, you pick up your social media and start What is that called, by the way? Do you know, in the social media vocabulary, it's called your feed. You start feeding. They feed food. Only it's not food, it is programming of mind. Do you know television programs are called programming? Because they're programming your mind. These terms are actually intentionally placed. You are being programmed, and you're so programmed, your mind is so restless, you don't know what to do when you're alone, you pick up your phone. If you go out, you see in a tourist spot, this beautiful scenery I see in Pondicherry, on the beach, beautiful scenery, all the tourists are sitting each with their phone. Mind-numbing hypnosis. And I'm using the word hypnosis without exaggeration because the clinical definition of hypnosis is where your eyes don't blink and your pupils are dilated. Observe the people watching their social media feed, they are hypnotized. And they are being given post-hypnotic suggestions. Human beings are hackable creatures and they have been hacked. By which power? By what interests? That will determine the future of human civilization. You see the way the danger is today. What can you do? This is a powerful force which has already invaded every home. Every child demands from you their mobile phone, and they are now adult only when they start feeding their material, isn't it? When they're programmed. You have to find a way, and there are many things you can do. Australia, I think, or New Zealand recently banned social media till the age of 16. Why cannot India do that? Indian government will not do that unless you build pressure. When you wake up, the government will follow. Otherwise, they have their own benefits in the process. It is even suiting them to keep you programmed and asleep, isn't it? How many in the government would like that you wake up and start demanding better performance from the government? It's convenient to let people remain asleep. And I'm not saying that it is necessarily evil on their part, it's just convenient. Status quo, maintain status quo. Why rock the boat? But we have to wake up because the mission that India has to fulfill requires a higher grade of consciousness to be awakened. And if there is one place in the world where the higher awakening can take place, it is in India, because it is the only civilization which has as its foundation this universal spirituality. And that will be India's gift. When Swami Vivekananda said that India will be the guru of the world. Yes, it's true. But from here to that point where you can actually, as an example, show something that works, there's a huge gap. So in Sri Aurobindo's words, a vast inner and outer change has to take place before India can fulfill her destiny. So when Sri Aurobindo fought for India's freedom, he had this whole vision. He started all these processes for the inner and outer change. We have more recently taken more, I would say, independent stance from international interests with the current governments. And outer changes are slowly shifting and taking place. But where is the inner change? Sri Aurobindo at that time began the new college with a new educational system as the framework in which India's education could now be rebuilt, and even a universal education built on it. His articles on integral education are so universal, they go down to the essentials. And from they rebuild the whole framework of education. Maria Montessori, who's the founder of the Montessori system, was paralleling Sri Aurobindo. Around the same year, she was doing her own writings. But the last 13 years of her life, she was living in Chennai, had read all of Sri Aurobindo's articles, and her books of that period are the most mature. And one of those she dedicated to Sri Aurobindo, wrote in her beautiful handwriting, and sent a copy to Sri Aurobindo. I'm just showing you that in the field of education, Sri Aurobindo's ideas are deeply aligned and even inspiring the Montessori system. What have we done to change that system so far? Nothing. Other than tweaking content of the school textbooks, which means nothing practically. You still go through the same process of mugging up mind-numbing education, which, when the British designed it, They declared that it is to create a nation of clerks. What happens to the children who pass through the educational system? How many of them will say, oh, I would now love to join my family's farm, grow food? No. What do I want? I want a job where I will sit on a desk at a computer and type things. That's all you want to do. You want to be another little bureaucrat or paper pusher or whatever it is that the system has programmed you is elite and makes you feel superior. How many of the children today will enter, you enter a farm, you clean the cow dung with bare hands. I can't touch that. You'll soil my clothes, which are so special, right? And really you have to ask, I'm taking these somewhat extreme examples, but you have to ask, can a nation be run by people sitting at computer desks? Obviously not. Who will then engage with the reality of life and do the things, the creativity which is needed, which is not merely repeating what you've been programmed to repeat? I was at a conference, I don't remember now, in one of the cities. It was in a large management institution, Indore, I think. And they had about 200 students who had just had the highest marks, so the session was just for them. And they'd invited 5, 6 people from business community who were very famous, and we were on the dais, and I was also part of that for different reason. And when I took the mic, I said to those students, all these people who have come in, who have been placed before you, are meant to be your examples of what you can become. But I said, don't make the mistake of trying to be what they have become. You have to be yourself the way they were themselves. You see? Their greatness was because they followed their Swadharma and reached a peak. You have to follow your Swadharma and reach your peak, not imitate them. Okay? First point. Second point, which was critical, I said, everything you have been taught to pass your exams, which you've done so well, has zero value for the future. Because anything that I can teach you now, AI will learn 10 times faster and apply 1,000 times faster than you. Whatever you have learned, I do not need from you. AI can replace you. What you have not learned, what I cannot teach you, I cannot teach AI, is what will make you great and make you reach your peak. If you think about this, it's too radical for them even to think, but when you think about this, you realize it's not what they were taught, it's not how well they had their marks. It's who they are as people. Their creativity, their innate drive, their innate passion, their swabhava and the swadharma and the drive which leads them to realize their full potential. And you see, it comes back to the spirituality which we spoke of, your unique relation with the divine, and therefore your line of development. And we need to say this. And the entire educational framework needs to be molded around this principle. Yes, certainly train them. Because by training, you're amplifying faculties. But without the illusion that the training is what will make them effective or successful in life. It is the faculty development, the capacities that you will grow through the training process which will make you capable. And what faculties will you look at? You want to develop your intelligence, surely. You want to develop your memory, certainly, to pass exams. And in real life, perhaps it's important, but not as important as your creativity. Your personal drive, your ability to face opposition and resistance and failure and persist and overcome, for which you should be able to analyze and review your failures and recast your approaches and modify yourself and so on. You see, the things which are needed for them to be able to achieve that success are exactly what we do not teach. Because those cannot be measured in an exam. The moment you have reduced education to verification by exam, you've thrown out the most important component. And the consequence is that they grow through the system thinking, oh, I'm a high performer. When they hit real life, suddenly things don't quite work out. Or They force themselves into a false groove and undergo severe depression and stress and other related problems. You notice how, and we see this more and more in public life, some of the most so-called successful media heads commit suicide or have severe depression. Why? They entered a false groove of track. They're not living their real life. So all these faculties which I outlined, which they need to actually realize their fulfillment and success in life, are exactly the faculties which we described yesterday, which are the amplified powers in the integral yoga. What I'm trying to show here through various different angles is the thing necessary for the future of the civilization, for the future of the world, and for the future of each of our children and grandchildren in their success in life is exactly the framework of the integral yoga. And derived from that would be a more specialized form of what Shri Aurobindo has referred to as integral education. This is essential for the awakening of humanity, and obviously for India and for our children. But we have to first become aware of what we have to do and then begin to put into practice for ourselves and then for our children and grandchildren. And we're in a space here which is exceptional. We have two things. First of all, most of you who are assembled here are coming from various centers in Gujarat. You have their access and I would say a responsibility to the children or the children in the families who come to the center. And I will say it is our failure if the children do not come. You did not reach out to them in the way they need. Correct it. Find ways, explore, experiment, find what works. I'm not going to give you suggestions beyond this right now because that's not the scope of our discussion. But you must get the children into the center so that they will be nourished with a spiritual ambience, but also with these ideas, by which they can find their sense of purpose and develop and awaken their full potential as a flower blooms, not be crushed by the exam-based education system. And I put it in this way sometimes to the children: the exam will crush you, but we will also teach you methods by which you will pass the exam with flying colors and not be crushed by it, but also not be bound by it. You will still unfold. See, if you flower out fully, you will perform well in the exam, recognizing its limitations. Maybe it's a necessary evil for the moment at least, but you will do well. But if you design yourself only for the exam, you will be crushed and you will come out a damaged person, emotionally, even sometimes intellectually. The highest suicide rates today you find in Kota, which is the focal point of IIT training. You know about that, Rajasthan. Yeah? And so many in IITs commit suicide. You go to some of the elite schools, Stanford Research Institute, Stanford or some of the others, MIT, you have psychiatrists on site for children who enter into severe problems. Why? Because that system is crushing, warping, soul-killing, mind-numbing. You know how it is. You know, when you look at the face of your child who's going to pass an exam, you can see how pained they are and what fear they have. And when they come back, they live in that fear because they will lose your approval if they don't perform well enough. But inside, they know that it's pointless. Most of it is pointless. And there are institutions around the world with no exam where the children fare far better, even in capacities. And they're happy. So have we even bothered to question the system and recast it and try out at least in pilot projects in the last 70 years? No. And those who have done successfully, and there are many such institutions at the Shri Aurobindo Ashram, in the J. Krishnamurti schools, and various others, they have proved the success of that approach going back 50 years now. Has the rest of India even attempted? No. Is there support for them? No. Gujarat is the only state where, under Kirit Joshi's guidance, there was a special law passed which encouraged innovation in education. But how much was it used? Nominally. Why? Because parents don't want it. Parents are afraid that if their children go into something which is not mainstream, then maybe they will have some disadvantage. What will happen to their career? Will they get into the best opportunities? No, I don't want to take a chance, push them into mainstream. You need to educate the parents. Out of love for the children, they put them in a crushing system because they want them to have a happy future. See? And I've actually had interactions with various schools when I talk to the parents and explain the whole approach of the integral education. They go, wow, we didn't realize that it's possible like this. Oh, but you need to educate society generally, put out these ideas, create examples within your own spaces. And so I said there are two special features here. Here we have people coming from all of the centers in Gujarat. In your own space, start making a change. Start discussing at least, attempt, explore, experiment. Doesn't matter if it fails. If you do not try, you won't know what works or what fails. And failure is very useful because then you can tweak and adjust until it gets to a meaningful direction. If you don't have failure right at the beginning and something works, then you're afraid to change it. You will never innovate, you see. But the other second feature, which is exceptional, is that we are in Aurobindo University. Isn't it? The difference, though, is here the children already come formed. Nevertheless, the difference we can make here will be critical. And I was only listening yesterday from H.P. Rama's feedback that the students who have passed on, when he asked them casually, well, what are the things which struck you? And they all say the science of living courses were so critical. We wish we could do it again now because it's so relevant for our life. So it's a small step, but it's a critical step. But we must also reorient the entire content more and more to align to these deeper values, civilizational values, universal values. And it is in this direction that we will participate in the overall awakening of the civilization and the spiritual awakening of humanity, without which humanity is in a mode of self-destruction. Time is short. You look at the number of diseases increasing. Cancer, every family today is talking of cancer. Someone nearby has had cancer. Do you remember, all of you are old enough, 30 years ago, cancer was so rare. What has happened in 30 years? What has changed? And the media will blind you by saying, oh, it is our lifestyle. No, it is not lifestyle. It is the poisoning of our food, poisoning of our water, poisoning of the soil and air. And nobody wants to talk about it because there are interests which don't want to change the poison that they're dumping into your food for certain profit or whatever it is. And if you do not wake up, it will not happen. So I'm pointing to the necessity, and we have an extraordinary opportunity here, make people conscious. And although here already in a university, children come formed by whatever damage the prior stages of education might have done, here is an opportunity to heal. Here is an opportunity to become conscious, because they see here the values which are encouraged and nourished. We can make the difference. Perhaps they're here for 3 years, but that is enough to make a sufficient shift that their life is set in a meaningful and worthwhile fulfillment. I'm avoiding the word success, I'm using the word fulfillment. Fulfillment is what you experience when you achieve your Swadharma. Success as it is defined today is largely a fake idea. You have to become famous or rich or something. Fulfillment is when you do this and you say, yes, now this is worthwhile, my life is worthwhile, I'm happy to do this. Isn't it? That should be our goal. So this is a background I wanted to set in which the discussions of yesterday have to be placed. And the big picture is the civilizational awakening and humanity's spiritualization. Because we are at a stage of transition, an evolutionary transition. And Shri Aurobindo points out, because whenever there is a major evolutionary transition, all that was in the past, which is no more relevant for the future, begins to break down. But the things of the future have not yet formed. You are in a kind of an in-between transition or a limbo. The result is extraordinary chaos, confusion. Because things you've been relying upon for centuries now don't work, you try harder, but they fail harder because they're no more relevant. And that's why he calls it an evolutionary crisis. And the nature of this crisis is the power of the intellect which brought us to where we are today is insufficient to take us further. 100 years ago, when science had reached certain peaks of discoveries, the promise of science was, at last now, we will make everybody happy. There will be plenty for everybody because science can solve all problems. And meaning reason, intellect, and innovation will solve all problems. What has it done? It has worsened the problems. We have developed more powerful tools to destroy the earth. We have developed chemicals which are poisonous to increase the quantum of your food by poisoning it. Can you imagine the stupidity of this idea? You spray a crop with poison so that you may have more food, but you don't look at the fact that this food, when it is eaten by somebody, will make them sick. Of course, you don't wash it. What happens to that chemical you sprayed? It goes into the soil in permanence. It happened recently, and for me it was shocking. So we had some plant growing out of the wall in the house. It was an old 200-year-old house. From a little crack, the seed grows and the plant comes out. And every year we try to remove, and the roots stay and then regrow. So this time somebody who was suggesting that we put the chemical inside, which kills the roots. I said, well, let's try. So I assumed in that little hole, they would put 1 or 2 drops of the chemical. And they showed some bottle. I didn't bother to check what it was. I said, okay, go ahead. I was busy with something. And then I came out and I found a man with a huge spray on the entire wall instead of just putting a drop into the hole. Why is he doing this? But it was too late. He was spraying, and the next morning, all the plants downwind from there for 10 meters down, all had died. All had become black. He sprayed this patch. The fine mist which the wind carried downwind for 10 meters killed all the plants. Then I said, what kind of a chemical is this? So I looked up the term on the internet, and they explained that this kills, how it damages the cellular working, how it kills. Okay, then I said, I looked for how long does this last when it goes into the soil? And on the internet, the information was 6 years, after which it is absorbed in the soil or in the plants. It never destroys itself. It never breaks down. Or at least they didn't give you a date of how long it takes to break down. It goes into the plant, meaning that's what you're going to eat. And what are the effects of this chemical on the human body? Kidney failure, liver failure, Alzheimer's, brain damage, etc. And then the shocking part was, this chemical in a diluted version is sprayed on all cashew plants, on rice, and various other crops. And it said there, they do not wash after spraying on cashew. Why? If you wash cashew, what will happen? It will get soft. You don't want that. So you've just sprayed it on cashew to kill insects who might eat your cashew. Now your crop quantum has increased. This poison sprayed cashew goes packaged now all over. And if you eat a large cluster of cashew, you're going to have that chemical doing everything that it's supposed to do on your body. Is there a government law at least to say, do not do this? Who will stand for us in parliament and say, please save our children from being poisoned? Nobody's interested. They're too busy fighting their other kinds of silly battles. Do you understand where we are today? And this is the power of science. We created greater poisons to help us, but on the other side, destroying life itself. They speak of climate change will raise sea levels after 100 years. This will kill the DNA in the next 10 years. Human fertility has dropped. to 1/5 of what it used to be 30 years ago. Testosterone in the male has dropped to 1/5 of what it used to be 30 years ago. What happened in these 30 years? And nobody's asking the question, how can we set it right? In the United States, the poisons which are going through the streams into the lakes are causing change in the fish, genetic change. Male fish have female organs, female fish have male organs. Because these are hormone disruptors. And the quantum pumped into the food supply is so great, it's going through the streams into the lake, and there you have the evidence of what damage it is doing to us. But we don't blame it. We say, oh, lifestyle. It's not lifestyle. It's poisoning. I'm sorry, I'm digressing a little bit from the spiritual, but you have no spiritual future if you do not stop your body being poisoned. There is no civilization or survival of humanity if you do not stop this crime of destroying nature and destroying life itself. And there is nobody speaking about it. Because there is no system which has an interest to protect life. All systems have been corrupted for their interests of survival of the system. The media, newspapers, television, political, economic, everywhere you look. Each protects its turf and its survival. Nobody looks at survival of humanity. And how much more of a crisis do we need before we wake up? And I'm looking at this at a very simple level, because from this comes the next level. How much more before we wake up for our spiritual purpose? Perhaps the wake-up call of the biological survival may also make us question, what are we here for? And then perhaps we will start thinking of the spiritual purpose. It's interesting for me to see across the world, especially in the groups which are working for cleaning of the environment from poisons, there is also a spiritual opening. This correlation is interesting. Because somewhere it makes us question, what is our priority? Why are we here? Why did we take birth? And we're coming a full circle to what we started with yesterday. We chose to take birth consciously because first and foremost, we are conscious souls. And as conscious souls, there is a line of development which is unique to each one of us that we have chosen to fulfill and realize through this life. And sometimes we also choose our environment, parents, or circumstances where we may get the best kind of nourishment we need for that line of development. And if your children have come into your family, it's your responsibility to nourish their soul's evolution while giving them a good education. But what kind of education if it cuts them off from their soul? You see, as a child, before you have gone through the programming of the school system, you are so spontaneous, clear, and joyous. In your eyes, you see the joy. From the point you're pushed into the mechanical part of the school system, all this begins to dull. And the soul's light begins to fade and is covered up as the different koshas of the body, life, and mind begin to unfold and develop. But if from the beginning in the education we have linked the development of those koshas, of those layers, with the soul's values, then instead of blocking the soul's light, they will radiate and express the soul's aspiration. Such would be the basis of an education which will prepare us for the true purpose of humanity. Such is what India has to, by example, recreate. How you do is secondary. Yes, you will find a great help in Shri Aurobindo's writings. You can follow what comes from Montessori. You can create your own system, doesn't matter. But start making that effort. And here we have a chance to do something extraordinary here at Auro University and in all your centers and in your homes. Start making that change. Don't wait. There is no time. And as the children grow more aligned to their soul's aspiration, you will have this awakening of the civilization and its spiritual potential, which will lead to, as we have seen yesterday, the spirituality we speak of is not cut off from the world. It will give you the fulfillment of a mastery of matter, of life, of mind. It will amplify your intelligence. It will amplify all your powers and capacities so that you can be that extraordinary leader. The example we have in the Indian tradition are the rishis. You see, when you look at the stories in the Mahabharata, the kings had to train the future prince or princess. Where did they send them? To the rishis, to the Gurukul. What did the rishi teach them? Everything from governance, economics, psychology, arts, sciences, and so on. They came back fully equipped to lead a nation. That training a rishi gave. But he was also master of philosophies and spiritual experiences. What kind of a human being is capable of all this? Isn't that extraordinary? Such should be our children. Such should be our great leaders, isn't it? Well, this will happen. It is inevitable. But the question is whether it happens now, in the next 10 years, or it will take another 1,000 years to wake up. That depends on us, what action we take now. We could go to sleep and say, oh, it will happen. Yes, it will. After much suffering, you will wake up. Or we can make the effort now and then it will happen rapidly with great joy. And especially the joy of being a pioneer. And of inspiring others. And you look back and you say, yes, I started doing that now. Everybody has caught up. It's so great. What a wonderful feeling. And this is what I will suggest should be the work here. Here at the Shri Aurobindo Integral Life Center, which I've described as the soul of this whole campus and of Auro University, this knowledge needs to be articulated, expressed, explored, experimented upon, taught. And for those of you who are faculty of the university, spend time, explore the content, because I've given you a glimpse of the kinds of things Shri Aurobindo has actually shared, and it's not even a first beginning. There's an entire text of Shri Aurobindo's articles which is called The Foundations of Indian Culture, where he looks at the various systems of polity, economics, art, science, from the spiritual foundations upon which the civilization built these, including governance systems. And the concept is fundamentally different from what we are taught from the West. I'll just give one small example in passing. You see, when we speak of king, we have an idea of what a king is, right? But a king in Europe or a king in the Middle East was the ruler and owner of the land and the people. Effectively, he could order any number of people killed or imprisoned or whatever according to his whim. If he went mad, well, the country suffered. But that was not the concept in India. The king was not ruler, was not owner. King was protector of Dharma. Dharma was superior to king. And if the king lost alignment with the Dharma, the people had the right to correct for that. And as protector of Dharma, he had to ask what is the right action to be done here. And where he could not understand, he would go and approach the wise man, the rishi, or somebody he trusted. What is the right action in this situation? In alignment with the Dharma. Dharma is this cosmic sense of purpose, which is in alignment with the divine unfolding in the evolutionary purpose of unfolding. And the king's job was to protect that. You see, a completely different approach. You still say king and the other person says king. They are not equivalent. So what are the civilization values here and how do they unfold? I will highly recommend for you to read this book, if this is the line of interest that you have. Another book you might want to look at is Shri Aurobindo's The Ideal of Human Unity, where he shows you how across 3,000 years of history, across the world, the various coming together and alignments of interests and political affiliations leading eventually to a one world unity of one humanity. And he shows you the process and the psychological principles which drive these processes. And it's fascinating. You realize, oh, that's why that happened in history. But that's not enough. He wrote this about now 110 years ago. He's then telling you what happens next as these processes continue based on the same psychological principles. And then he tells you, and this is so extraordinary, He anticipates the formation of the Soviet Union, the formation of the European Union, the formation of a North American Union, and of course India's freedom and India's role. And when first the League of Nations forms, he points out its failures, and the United Nations and its failures. What is needed? And all built on rational first principles and psychological principles by which collectivities develop, work, and align themselves. And it's fascinating. You really understand how politics works today. But then he warns, there are two models in which this unification of the world can take place. One model is the one world government, where there's a gigantic global bureaucracy which will crush and suffocate individuality of nations and their creativity. And the other is the model where all the nations come together as free, independent units, aligning themselves in some kind of a federal framework, which would protect their independence and their distinctive genius. Because each nation has something unique to offer to the whole world. And India's role in this is the offering of the spiritual knowledge and the spiritual values by which its civilization has been molded. So these two models are actually competing today. And if you look at the world affairs, this is what you see as the struggle happening. And the danger of the first model succeeding is real. As I quoted Harare, who says, Yuval Harare, who says that human beings are hackable creatures. That's your first model. Centralized bureaucratic governance, hacking people and enslaving their minds. The other is the liberating spiritual potential, perhaps. Again, which way will we go depends on when we can wake up. And all these I'm giving examples. For those of you who are interested in the psychology of human development and in what way we grow and develop even in our spiritual or psychological potential, in self-development even, you'll find the synthesis of yoga. The framework of the systems of yoga which are unified. And all these he describes, and the means by which you can accelerate your evolution. In the text which is called The Human Cycle, he describes how the stages of development, what we call the 4 yugas, but once you understand the psychological basis of these, you'll find these take place in our daily life, in our individual life, in our collective life, in the life of an institution such as this. And it's an extraordinary insight. And he shows you the way forward. So the kind of broad reach, spread of knowledge that you will have, that you will tap is extraordinary. Start reading. Read what interests you first and explore. And I would like that all the faculty here take advantage of the opportunities that could be provided here, perhaps even to organize from your side programs exposing them to these kinds of in summary form ideas, seed them not only in the faculty but with the students equally. And with that, you gain a certain perspective of life, which the same students, when they pass on, when they come back, they will say, yes, this was exactly what we needed and it helped us. I would even suggest that those students who have passed on and who now say, I wish we could do that course of Science of Living once again, invite them back now to an advanced course, which is applicable to their current circumstances of life. And give them the training now for which they are yearning, isn't it? So there's an extraordinary opportunity here to assist the youth and even the young adults to recover their deeper roots. But it starts with us. And that's why this exhortation for all of you to start taking a few small steps. In this, I will highlight particularly what we dwelt upon yesterday, even as the framework of the integral yoga, that within you is that divine potential. Within you, you as a conscious soul are the focal point and center of the personality, or should become. And you must dedicate some time every day to align yourself to this deepest truth within you. Do not start the day by getting up and rushing into work. Your consciousness is thrown out. You are lost on the surface confusion. Take a moment to center yourself. Find the deepest center that you can within you. And from there, begin your day. And where necessary, when you have a difficulty, when you have a problem, take a pause and come back to this center and rest in it. Because in this center of the storm around is the calm, is the peace, is the clarity, is the compassion, is the love, is the harmony which you seek, which you lose on the surface. And just this simple act of coming back to your center and engaging, re-engaging from there will change completely the balance of circumstances around you. You are in conflict, let's say you are having a meeting and there's a conflict and a difference of opinions. Each one goes back to their center, rests in that for a while, and you come back and the entire energy has shifted, the perspective has shifted, and there is a spontaneous harmony, the problem is resolved. It is actually as simple and as miraculous as that. But then you must make a habit of this. So start with yourself every morning. Give yourself 5 or 10 minutes. Sit quietly in a space, if you have, where you can do that, which is sacred for you in your home. And become conscious that deep within you is the divine presence. Or if you do not feel it, you feel its influence in you, which registers as this aspiration for the good, for the beautiful, for the true, or as a bhakti to the divine mother, to your Ishta Devata, your favorite form of deity. Feel that. But what you feel is already something which is flowing out. Let yourself flow back to its source, which is deeper within. So you become conscious of this devotion, this love, this gratitude, or this sense of wonder, or the seeking for truth or beauty, and then you flow back as if to its source and let yourself deepen and remain immersed in it. It is deeply refreshing, deeply nourishing. You feel so satisfied. It's the only thing finally in life which will give you the satisfaction that you seek. Stay in that as long as you like. And then from that poise, now you turn to face the day. Look at what you have to do. What are the things which are there that you plan to do? And make a kind of a overall perspective from that poise. And then flow. When you flow from there with this larger picture, you will find circumstances tend to align, because the vibration of this center is a vibration of harmony. As that comes forward and fills you, the things you engage with are automatically drawn into harmony, because you hold a center of harmony. This is the spiritual principle. I remember once, I had just completed my formal education and I was working in the ashrams, one of the departments of the ashram with computers. And I remember at that time when I was specially aligned, one day I said, oh, now today I have to meet X, Y, and Z, 3 people who I never see. They are in completely different spaces of the community. I step out of my house and X is passing by. I finish the work. I walk a few steps and I meet Y. And I go a little more and I meet Z. And the work was done in 10 minutes. I could not have planned it. That perfect timing of alignments could not have happened even if I tried to plan it. It happened spontaneously because the deeper alignment. Yes, maybe this is perhaps a dramatic example, but you'll experience not just the alignment in circumstances, but most important, the deep satisfaction you have. It is when we get cut off from this deeper presence within us that life becomes empty, hollow, meaningless, purposeless, and we tend to slide into depression. Because it is from here that comes the juice, the joy, the sense of fulfillment of life. Align yourself to that every morning. And if you can, every evening before you go to sleep. And again, a very simple exercise. You look back at all the work that you did in the day. All those meetings, all those interactions, all those challenges, all those successes, and all those failures, whatever it is you did. Take the whole burden which is weighing on you. Package it. And consciously offer it to the divine and say, here, this is no more my burden. This is the best I could do today. I offer it to you. And align yourself, center yourself in this presence within. You become like a child now, free of burden. And you go to sleep like a baby. And you sleep and awaken refreshed. Do this once, try it out tonight. Experience the benefit of it, and you will want to do this every day. The days you forget to do it, you will find your sleep is disturbed, because you're still carrying the burden of the day in your sleep and in your dreams. And the day will start fresh because no more burdened by the past. And you meet each day afresh. It's a very simple exercise, but it will change completely your life because you bring yourself back to your center. Put yourself back in alignment, in right relation with the divine presence. And then if you wish to go further and deepen this in a conscious sadhana, take time for that. And I'll suggest 2 particular entry points which are highly valued in the integral yoga, and there is a rationale for them, because these are the 2 points in which you can most closely, directly experience the divine presence. The first, which I've already described, inward, towards the source from which your aspiration and gratitude and love flow from, which would be your inmost soul, your psychic being, whatever vocabulary you use. It's not in the emotions, it's behind the emotions. So when you sit, you make yourself very quiet as you can, even emotionally. And then feel behind. And there in the stillness, you feel the touch of that love, gratitude, devotion, aspiration. And then you drift, slide deeper, deeper. Stay in it. Let it flow out and nourish you. Like a spring which comes from deep inside the cave, as the waters flow out, they fill you and give you this deep, quiet joy. It is not an excitation. Excitation always tires you. We've been taught by the fake values of society that you should always be excited. I find it very difficult sometimes when people say, we've been working on this and we are very excited to share with you. And I imagine them jumping around in excitement. I would say, I'm very happy to share with you. Excitation is passing, transitory, always followed by a lapse into the negative, tiredness, exhaustion. But a deep, quiet happiness is sustained, can be permanent, and that comes from that influence. And with it, there is a deep, spontaneous discrimination which is natural to your soul. In the yoga tradition, the soul in its journey of evolution is described as the swan. You see, Paramahamsa is a title given, but the Hamsa term comes from there. Hamsa, the swan in its journey, and there's an interesting etymology to the word, but you're taught in the story, in the Puranic tradition, that if you take milk and water and mix it and give it to the swan can drink the milk and leave behind the water. Now you've been told this story. If you try this with a swan, poor fellow, he cannot distinguish. He will drink up the whole thing or refuse it. But the swan here is the soul. And what you're being taught in this beautiful symbol is in-life experiences. That which is real and that which is fake and mixed. In the mixture, your soul's spontaneous discrimination will catch that which is true and reject which is false. It will reveal to you spontaneously what part is true, what part is mixed. And when this is strong as an influence within you, it will navigate like a compass, take you through difficulties and warn you something feels wrong there, that feels more right, and it will lead you. Not always knowing fully why, but later you'll look back and you'll say, yes, I had the guidance, it protected me, it led me. Make this a first practice and let this be your foundation more and more. But the second practice is another center which is just here at the top of the head, where your mind and thinking awareness opens out to something larger, vaster, higher and truer. Just above the head is a vast presence of the self, a deep peace, a wideness, even an oceanic presence and even a light and many more things. Bliss. Consciously center yourself here and open out to that vast presence and stay with it. After a while, you may find yourself drawn up, or you may find that beginning to descend into you. Either of these movements, let it happen. Sometimes you'll find yourself drawn up in a deep, joyous immersion, and then you'll feel the peace descending and it will fill you. Let it go all the way down to your feet. And it will bring in you a deep calm, a deep equality. Remember the importance of equality yesterday, spontaneously. And spontaneously your mind will fall silent. You won't have to struggle with thoughts. It'll just become clear and quiet. No effort. And in that state, you'll find you can think better, more clearly, and act more effectively, because there is not the restlessness and confusion. All within you becomes aligned. It's a very simple practice, but extremely powerful, life-changing even. It is so important that I have put online a guided process, a guided meditation, which is called Guided Meditation for Descent of Peace. You will find this on YouTube, on my channel called Integral Studies. See if that helps you. Play that, go through the whole process once. If it helps you, use it. Otherwise, get the hang of it, do it in your own way. But as an exercise, a concentration above the head is the second most powerful and effective method of opening to the higher consciousness. And when things begin to descend from above, you have also the intuition which will grow. And a strength and a force and a power, a love that will flow and fill. The practical result of these two very basic practices would be increasing in deeper knowledge and wisdom and calm and equality. Amplification of your capacities, because more effective and aligned and centered, laminar in their flow. Amplification of the power and effectivity in your actions, in your thoughts. And third, increasing growth of harmony and love and joy and beauty. And these are the three things which are, so to say, the foundation of the Sanatana Dharma, the eternal truth of the divine unfolding. Dwell on these, put into practice whatever you feel spontaneously aligned to or most easily able to put in practice. Read, draw inspiration from what you read. Look at or watch videos which will help you develop and grow in this knowledge and practice. And as we grow conscious in our sadhana, in our practice, our evolution is accelerated multifold. And as I said yesterday, at a minimum of tenfold. The result, Shri Aurobindo points to, is within humanity itself, there are two trends. One part of humanity which is choosing to slide down and fade out into chaos and confusion. And another part which is choosing to rise up and grow into higher potential and consciousness. And the split will become more and more evident. It is also one of the reasons for the great chaos, because there are two completely different value systems in collision. But for those who choose to rise up and let this ascension take place, all in nature is here to assist you, because remember, this is an evolutionary transition. Nature is making a leap. She will carry you and support you equally, as well as the divine help from above. But the leap of this transition, Shri Aurobindo says, is as radical as the transition from the ape to the human. We are literally in a transition which will build as if, or grow out of this humanity, a superior, spiritualized, supra-humanity. And this split is so obvious. We're still too close to the event to recognize where it's heading. But in another 20 years, you will see the difference so large that there will be as if two kinds of humanities. And it has nothing to do with where you are or what you believe in. It has to do only with you choosing to grow in consciousness or choosing to fall in chaos and confusion. Out there are forces which want to catch your children and draw them down. They're pushing drugs, they're pushing alcohols and all kinds of vices onto the children as early as they can. You have to make sure how you protect them, make them conscious, give them the inner strength to refuse those negative influences. Make them conscious that deep inside them they already know what is right and what is wrong, and follow that deeper calling. When you experience this and put this into practice and speak about it to them, they too will feel it and will put into practice. Help them make the choice to grow as you choose to grow. And this is where we are, and it is on this point that I will pause what we have been covering since yesterday. This Shri Aurobindo Integral Life Center, I hope and we aspire, will become a focal point for this transition, for this awakening that has to take place. Of all the states in India, Gujarat is one of the most awake. You're familiar with that, you know how that works. It's one of the most conscious in many ways. So there's an opportunity here for even setting a new standard, new set of values. Start with yourself and let this work in the center grow, and let our university flower and help build the future of India and of humanity. Let's take a moment in a quiet aspiration for ourselves, for our children, and for the work that we have to do with them. We can conclude with a chant of Om together, aligning our individual aspirations in a large fire of a collective aspiration for ourselves, for our children, in service to Mother India, in service to humanity, and for the fulfillment of the divine Dharma, will in creation. Om.